Greetings everyone, I'm Esteban Eusemunera.
And I'm Jaime Bautista. We are pre-service teachers from the course Content Area Nature and Conditions 2 with Professor Ruben Palacio, MA.
The following podcast, an independent and comprehensive audiovisual broadcasting technology according to a certain Chinese expert called Paul Monsi, is part of a series of activities we have been developing to identify and attempt to narrow the gap between EFL policies in Colombia and the realities faced by teachers and students within local academic settings.
For this particular assignment, we interviewed 5 teachers and a teacher educator from 2 private universities here in Medellín, who work at different academic settings such as language centers, public and private schools, and a master's program.
In order to provide a deeper insight for our observations, we also include some critical perspectives from Doris Correa, Jaime Uzma, Bolivariana, Rosalba Cárdenas, Fanny Hernandez, Isabel Cadavid, Maria Magnuti, Diana Quinchilla, and other Colombian scholar researchers, as well as our own.
We hope you all find it useful or at least disquieting. Either way, let us proceed. And how well acquainted are you of the Ministry of Education's foreign language guidelines, standards, and suggested curriculum?
I would say I'm acquainted because here in the university we use them. Also in schools that I've worked, we also use, and I know the different levels that we have to use. For example, in the ministry, it shows you exactly all the guidelines according to each levels, according to the ages. So what do they have to know? So we use them according to the levels.
I think that the guidelines from the Ministry of Education towards foreign language is just, I don't know, in my opinion, is just a little bit of like out of context, in my opinion. They really don't know what happens in the classrooms. We have one culture and English comes from another culture, and most of the teachers I see, they try to teach English based on our culture, and I don't think that's proper. So that's it, you know.
I am pretty well acquainted with that. Yes.
Okay, sir. So, how do you keep those policies in mind for planning your lessons?
Basically, okay. Wait, hold on.
Okay.
How do I keep?
Here we have 3 seemingly diverse perspectives expressed by EFL teachers at the Languages Center from a private university in Medellín on foreign language policies within our national context. According to what is stated by USMA 2007, there are certain external issues hindering teachers' willingness, promptness, and preparedness to actively participate in the implementation of context-sensitive proposals for EFL teaching and learning at the academic settings where they work. Those external factors include, among others, lack of collegial and administrative support, imposed educational policies, lack of time, teaching load, and institutional centralized powered structures. As a result, they either resign themselves to do what they are told or decide to wield their autonomy to adapt their courses based on their own pedagogical principles and beliefs. That in case they have such experience and professional background. Now let's see how teachers' autonomy or heteronomy, for most of the cases, is reflected on the lesson planning and assessment fields.
How do you choose your resources and assessment techniques?
All my classes are student-centered.
Okay.
So based on that, all the material is practically tailored to my students' needs. And they all go according to whichever skill I'm working on that day.
Okay, I like to use the material that is given to me, and the material that I'm told to teach. Basically, the textbooks that that, for example, the group that I am working with at the moment, for example, if I'm working on I like to work I just like to work with the textbooks that I'm using with the group at the moment.
Another good question. I think, well, if you wouldn't know and if you wouldn't have experience, you would probably rely on the guidelines to choose those resources. But in my case, I've been a empiric teacher most of my life, and just now, after 20 years of teaching, is that I'm getting my certification. So having said that, choosing my resources, again, is always based on the student and the group. I think that the center of it all and the success of a language learning is not on any book, it's not on any anything else but the student's needs.
As the authors state, there are some EFL teachers, such as teacher number 2, who actually include a wide set of formative experiences to make students reflect upon and continue improving their learning processes and strategies, as well as the quality of what they are willing to offer to their academic and job settings. Even when they have not explicitly implemented the opportunity to teach and learn standards, which is Cardenas and Hernandez 2012 core proposal, their teaching practices indeed foster individual as well as cooperative knowledge expansion and consolidation, paving the way for meaningful learning, and we will add for meaningful teaching in a wide variety of contexts. However, there are some other cases, as the ones which could be noticed in certain interviews, where in terms of Cadavid, McNulty and Quinchilla 2004, teachers highly rely on textbooks and moreover on the ones demanded by their employers for establishing the sequence of contents for their courses, structuring the lessons, designing activities, and even choosing the interaction patterns to define their own and students' roles throughout every class. In that sense, let us confront if the aforementioned criteria for course planning, teaching practices, and learning assessment also applies for those teachers who declared keeping foreign language policies in mind for their EFL courses.
Do you believe those policies are still reflective of today's classroom and language learning realities, and why?
I would say yes, because every time we're updated and we use all these policies, so we could with the competences and everything, so we can keep like an average and we could continue having like updated information. And I think it's something important so we can know each student's level.
As a teacher, you need to make them real. You need to make them tangible. Yes, and you need to tailor them according to your students' needs. You have some standards, you have curriculum to attend, but you have a population, you have a world, you have a universe in front of you. And if you understand the goal, you understand the objective, but you also take into account the population, the universe you have in front of you, you can do wonders.
I don't think so. I mean, I think that foreign language policies are far away from the reality. Like what they say in the policies is something they think about at an office, somewhere different from realities. Why? Because we see, for example, in the case of bilingualism. So they want to make the country bilingual, but they do not supply the conditions, or the conditions are not there to implement that policy.
In this recent study about language policy making models in Colombia, Correa and Usma 2013 identified the adoption of a bureaucratic perspective on the development of the National Bilingual Program, which is what the teacher educator from the MA program of a private university in Medellín accused as policies conceived at an office, far away from the realities of the EFL teaching and learning settings. As a result, the views provided by those policies are decontextualized by nature, since they are deprived of the thoughts, reflections, and bottom-up proposals of the rest of the stakeholders who are the ones actually working and making research in the fields where all those guidelines and regulations are pretended to be implemented. Although, we can notice that, for instance, in the design of the suggested curriculum structure for English from 2016, the National Ministry of Education, by contrast with the definition of the basic standards of competencies for English from 2006, conformed a whole committee for the evaluation and curricular validity of the whole document, which included some representatives of different private universities in Colombia and a lower number of public ones. That specific ministerial decision may represent a step forward for the inclusion of teachers' perspectives within FL policies in the country. Nevertheless, with a closer consideration of the reasons behind that scheme, it results just another strategy for the authentication of idealistic perspectives about EFL teaching and learning in the only contexts among Colombian classroom realities where it works, or furthermore, in terms of the certification of those institutions represented there, it must work. So what about the rest?
Some teachers have given us interviews, and based on these interviews we can infer a lot of things, and there are a lot of ideas that come to our minds. For example, most of them talk about an oral competence. How this, well, they don't use the term oral competence, but we can see that they make their activities, they fill them with debates, talking activities, because they want the student to talk in class and develop this competence. One thing is, one teacher, for example, talk about the necessity of designing the activities, tailoring these activities, which is the term he uses, for the student, so that he can understand and to work them out based on his interest. Here we can bring an investigation done by Hugo Araiza. He interviewed some teachers, and based on their feedback, he makes some ideas, he made some conclusions. For example, he said that some of the teachers he interviewed recognize that education should be more critical, should be more transformative. This is related to what this precise teacher told us, because this teacher talks about a more critical method that really doesn't base itself on the standards and the papers that are given to him, and instead he looks to understand how the students want to learn and how they learn. Here we can bring something told by Jaime Usma. What he says is that languages and how they are worked out is something really unpredictable. This generally changes based on local constructions and reconstructions. We can see that this is in play because students teachers really don't use those papers that are given to them. Some of the teachers, while they are not acquainted with the papers or are not interested on them. We can relate this also to with Hugo Areiza's article. He says that based on his investigation, he discovered that teachers from university generally don't use those things. Not only those papers, official papers, but also things like technologies. No one of the teachers we interviewed talk about taking the students to computer rooms, for example. This could help improve the classroom activities. For example, Jaime Uzma says that an educational system that uses more technical technologies may be very useful in the long run. After all, we are in a generation that the students are generally acquainted with these kind of things and they are also interested in them. Another thing is that Jaime Uzma says that these things, like the reforms and the papers, official papers, well, they might seem like very nice in appearance, very appealing. They generally don't address what the population needs. This is having Colombia as a context. This idea by Jaime Uzma is pretty much why one of the teachers decided to not use the standards. He said he read them, but he is not interested in them. At the end of the day, by taking these interviews, we can see that every teacher has a different way to interact with the students, and these many differences in interactions allow the student to realize new ways to use the language. One of the things Jaime Uzma also says is that if the teacher allows the student, he doesn't use the word teacher precisely, but he says that the students, if there are people are exposed to new ideas, language, or technologies, they will change the way in which they interact with each other and how they act on the world. And by using these different strategies that teachers make, debates, games, plays, you can see that these students will find a lot of ways and a lot of interesting and innovative ways to work the language and understand and get closer to it.
So, after such words from scholars in service teachers and the teacher educator whose perspectives guided our discussion throughout this Response podcast, what can we conclude?
Well, I consider that teachers should express what they think about their context, the students, the classroom, and those issues that appear within the academic setting.
There is certainly a whole set of challenges for policymakers regarding what you just said, because teachers are the ones who implement policies, and therefore these regulations should take their voices into account.
The policies we have are written in beautiful terms. It is just that our context may not be the correct one for them as they are actually conceived.
Perhaps we can overcome that situation you and many others here mentioned. However, that achievement demands that teachers take the time they most of the times do not have and decide to make research about their practices in the pursuit of the quality of education the government expects.
Of course, since research offers teachers the possibility of understanding their own realities and of communicating those realities to the ones who are not with them in the arena and who are ultimately taking the decisions that affect the whole educational system.
Well, it has been a pleasure to share with all of you what we have been doing for the last 2 months.
We hope to receive your feedback and to widen our perspectives with all your proposals from this podcasting experience.
Thanks a lot.
And see you around.